Yeah.
Oh, that makes
Go
sense.
to these things. Have limited choices, so.
Yours I have.
You're gonna go on vibrant.
Every time we go down to 90 and stuff. Yeah, that's a job. That's what he's got a job.
All right. Oh, it's.
You're now in
Well, what time is it? Are we on time?
10:02.
10:02. It looks like we have a quorum, so unless I hear any strenuous objections, I'll call this meeting of the Capital District Regional Planning Commission to order. I'd like to welcome everybody. And for our own benefit as well as the viewing public, why don't we go around the room and introduce ourselves, and then anybody who is zoomed in can also introduce themselves. So I'm Larry Schillinger, Albany County, presently chairing the Capital District Regional Planning Commission.
Thank you. Craig Warner, Anamartha, representing Saratoga County.
Wayne Jordan representing Rensselaer County.
Agatha Reed representing Saratoga County and the Town Board of Clifton Park.
Imei Han representing Schenectady County Engineering Department.
Charlie Davidson, representing Schenectady County, Sustainability Coordinator.
Bill Bruce, Albany County.
Judy Bressler, Rensselaer County.
Gary Hughes, Schenectady County.
Amy Weinstock, CDRPC.
Kristen Swinton, Albany County.
Sandy Mislitz, I'm the Executive Director of the Capital Region Transportation Council.
Don Ackerman, Schenectady County.
David Obenkamp, Schenectady County.
Jacqueline Stallone, I'm Rensselaer County.
I'm Joe Grasso, I'm supervisor for the town of Charlton, representing Saratoga County.
Mark Castiglione with the Regional Planning Commission.
Do we have anybody zoomed in?
Jason.
Jason Kemper, Saratoga County.
Okay, thank you, Jason. And then staff?
Haley Belknap, Sustainability Planner.
Madison Marisco, GIS and Data Analyst.
Josh Dranoff, Sustainability Planner.
Good morning, Kate Manor, Director of Planning and Economic Development.
Dr. Bosey, Director of Sustainability.
And I'm Lauren Martell, the new Environmental Planner.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, now that no one has plausible deniability, let's get into the agenda here. First item on the agenda, we have the June 12th meeting minutes. I'm sure everybody has thoroughly read the minutes and would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I just wonder why that one section was highlighted in red on there. About the lease agreement for the PFAS. Got to change.
Oh,
It's, yeah, it's highlighted.
Number 4.
do we know why?
Hold on, what page?
Second.
Oh, I see.
Third page.
I apologize. When I printed the minutes, I changed them for I reflected some changes that David had asked. And when I printed out the minutes, the wrong copy printed.
So you
these-
printed the marked up copy?
Yes.
Versus the change copy?
Yes,
Gotcha.
So
you say
approve as amended?
yeah, because I did amend them with all your corrections.
Okay, well, now we know your stream of consciousness
Mhm.
in preparing. the
we're
minutes.
looking at it.
Yeah, see, we look at them.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion.
Well, Bill, since you've stuck your neck out and asking for the explanation, I would entertain a motion
Okay, make a motion.
to accept the minutes.
Second.
Seconded by Craig. All in favor?
Aye.
Objections? Abstentions? Motion passes. Good. And we are honored to have with us today. Ready? Oh,
I can, let me get the PowerPoint up.
Okay, we're honored today to have Sandy Misowitz from the Capital Region Transportation Council down the hall. To speak to us about the in motion plan, which is the update for the Metropolitan Planning Organization to go to 2050. And this will also like to say that, you know, these two boards closely collaborate, and I think that with Sandy and with Mark's leadership, I think we're trying to enhance that level of collaboration for the betterment of the four-county region that we serve.
And it's not just about collaboration. They also provide up to $183,000 of funding that supports the work that we do, which supports the work that they do. So it's a very strong partnership. And we just signed a new 10-year contract with the Department of Transportation to continue that partnership. But the in motion plan, and Sandy will get into this, is basically the template and the guidebook that the Transportation Council will use to invest millions of dollars in the region's transportation infrastructure. So it's not just a plan that sits on a shelf, it really guides the investment that happens around the table down the hall. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sandy.
Thanks, Mark, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for the invitation to come and speak with you. So, I wanted to provide you folks with an update on where we're at with the plan, what the plan is going to be working toward over this next year, and give you sort of a background on what tasks have been completed to date. So next slide, please. Just as a reminder who we are, as Mark mentioned, we're the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Capital Region. If you're not familiar with us or you're kind of new to what we do, every metropolitan area in the country has a metropolitan planning organization. So every urbanized area of 50,000 or more people has one of these organizations. And our primary purpose is to assign federal transportation funds to plans, projects, and programs that implement a regional vision for transportation. So we allocate, as Mark said, millions of dollars every couple of years towards a whole range of projects. Our members, we have 8 municipalities, or 8 cities, I should say. So the mayor of the city of Albany is our chair. The 4 counties are representation. We have a rotating membership of towns and villages. The town of Colony is a permanent seat by virtue of its size. And then all of the regional agencies that you see here, CDTA, CDRPC, et cetera. Next slide. So what the emotion plan is, if you've been around here a long time, you may have heard us talk about New Visions, and there was New Visions 2000, New Visions 2010, New Visions 2020, New Visions 2030, up to New Visions 2050. Talk about New Visions a lot for the last 30 years. I've been working at CDTC, formerly now the Transportation Council, for 25 years. I'm tired of talking about New Visions because I look at my window, it looks pretty much the same as it did 25 years ago. I don't know about you guys. So what we decided to do is sort of rebrand the long range plan for the region, because we wanted to really start thinking about a different future and what that could look like for transportation. And this is a collaborative process and a journey that we're all on to develop this new regional vision for transportation. And we have to balance sort of our big aspirational goals with the realities of the funding that's available, right? So that's the balancing act that we have to do in this long range plan. But what we're really trying to do is set the policies and the priorities by which we'll be using to invest our funding for, again, those plans, programs, and projects. Next slide, please. So the process kind of started around mid 2023. It's a 5-step process that we're undertaking. The plan needs to be adopted by September 2025. We're required under federal law to adopt a new plan every 5 years. We are offering opportunities for the public to be involved in all phases of the development of the plan. We've completed to date the data collection piece, phase 1. We started and are basically wrapping up the inform phase, phase two. So we're entering the phase three, the imagine phase now. And you'll be seeing a lot more work from us in the coming months, particularly over the winter, where we're really gonna be getting into the meat of the build of the plan. So next slide, please. So just some of the items that we have completed, obviously, like many planning activities, we know we have a branding and a new, not so new now, but a plan website. Called emotionplan.org. I encourage you to take a look at it. All of the materials that we've completed today are available there. Some of the things that have contributed already to the plan, we developed a congestion management plan document, which specifically talks about traffic in the capital region. So there's a lot of interesting data there, points out some of the pinch points in the region and some ideas on how to make cost-effective investments. We're not talking about wholesale redos of roadways to accommodate traffic. That's not the message we're sending with the congestion management process. The coordinated plan talks about senior transportation for folks with disabilities and some of the strategies that we should be thinking about as a region on those topics. And in coordination with CDRPC, we built a regional trend story map. This complements the regional trends conditions reports. Think of that as the existing conditions document. Traditionally, you have a really thick document that people really don't spend a lot of time reading anymore. So what we've done is translate that into a story map, which is an interactive tool that allows you to sift through a range of data points, get some snippets of information about our region, and really just honestly tells the story of where we're at today. What's going on in the region. So next slide. So some of the trends that were identified through that work, as you all probably are well aware, we have slow population growth. We are growing, but it's a very slow pace compared to many other parts of the country, even compared to downstate New York. We have growing concerns about the affordability of housing that's complemented by the availability of housing. Our population is getting older. We are experiencing an increase in traffic crashes, which we're doing a whole separate planning exercise for. We have an inequality of opportunity. What we really mean by that is the mismatch between where people live and where certain types of jobs are and how folks can access those jobs. So that transportation connection, commute times are getting longer for some folks because of where certain types of jobs are now located. So we're increasingly concerned about that access. We're in an oldest part of the country. As you can imagine, we have aging infrastructure that we have to address. Our bridges over the Hudson River, many of them are 100 years old, believe it or not, and are reached the point at the end of their useful life. As you can see through the kind of flow of the data and the map, we're still experiencing a sprawling development pattern. We have disconnected development. It's increasingly leading to, especially with the significant change for working at home. There's no single policy we could have developed as a transportation planning organization that had an impact on the system the way the pandemic did. But we're still seeing the impacts of that, and what we're seeing from a transportation perspective is there's a lot less traffic in the downtowns and a lot more in our suburbs. That's made more complicated by the fact we have Uber Eats, we have Uber and Lyft serving as taxi services, we have delivery going on all day, as well as folks working from home. So it's interesting. We're doing a driver survey right now to kind of get a sense from the perspective of a driver how they think about their impact, because I don't think a lot of people realize by my taking my 2 trips off the roadway network because I work at home, but I have 8 delivery vehicles coming to my house all day, that actually your impact's worse. Right. So I think we're trying to get a sense from people of what their understanding is of their impact on the transportation system. So the second phase, some of the other things, we've completed a couple of surveys. We've developed draft goals and objectives for the plan. We have a vision statement that we've also completed. Next slide. And just in terms of the priority survey responses, this is about 175 members of the public. But I think the theme that is coming across in this survey, as well as a lot of our other surveys, is there's an increased demand for alternative forms of transportation, and we're not interested in building new roads. And I think that theme is coming through in a lot of the work we're doing so far. Next slide. Some of the goals, or actually the proposed draft goals, and these are remaining draft until the end of the process because we expect things to continue to flow and ebb and change and evolve as we get more information. But we have established 7 goals for the plan: safety, mobility, access, equity, livability, climate, and resilience. And we're getting, like I said, we're refining some of these. Next slide. We did ask the public, and we got about 250 responses to this survey of how they reacted to the goals. And not surprisingly, a lot of folks said they like them, but I think what's more telling is the reasons people said I don't like them. And some people were saying, well, who would say no to these? Who's gonna say no to safety? Who's gonna say no to protecting the climate, right? They also felt they were a little vague. Some people were confused about why we had a climate specific goal versus a resilience goal. Climate specific goal in our brains was more carbon reduction, whereas the resiliency is more about addressing the impact, flooding and unexpected events. So there's some language there I think we need to tweak a little bit. More interest on land use and density. I mentioned that to this group in the role of a commission because you folks deal a lot more with sort of that land use piece of the puzzle here, and we'll be working more with CDRPC staff on how to build in more on land use and density, and what we can do to incentivize different forms of development, shifting away from the single occupant motor vehicle a bit through how we're designing our region. And then more interest in just providing more reliability on the system. Folks get most aggravated when things are unexpected on their commute. So how can we build more reliability into the system? So next slide. So I'll just read you quickly the draft vision statement. Again, this is going to remain draft as we continue to evolve, but by 2050, we will strive to maintain a clean transportation system that provides safe, equitable, resilient, and reliable options for the movement of people and goods. The capital region will thrive with a seamless multimodal network that is community focused, connecting all people to economic opportunity while supporting sustainable growth and livable communities. Transportation investments will address inequities, improve system performance, adapt to technological advancements, and protect the environment for future generations. So that's our draft sort of aspirational goal. And as I said at the beginning, the trick now is, what does that mean in practice? How do we balance this aspirational vision with the available funding, the priorities of the region, and trying to determine what those are as we move forward. So next slide. A big component of this plan, which is a little different than our past plans, is the emphasis on equity. More than ever, we want to make sure that we're capturing the opinions and perspectives of all the range of users of the transportation system. So we set these goals of continuous, thorough, inclusive, and effective, where we want to make sure we're, throughout this entire process, engaging with the public. We're providing as many options as possible for folks to engage, that we're actually tracking who we're talking to and getting input from. So we understand that we're actually meeting our demographic objectives.
Yeah.
And we'll be continuing to assess that throughout the process. Next slide. This is just an example from one of our recent surveys of how we're cataloging and capturing some of this data. We do have demographic questions, as well as we ask for a zip code. So we have some idea of who's answering these questions, and we'll be tracking this with each survey that we do. And what's interesting, the regional prevalence column for each variable represents sort of the regional average, if you will, for that variable. So with this, folks with disabilities, 12% of the population it identifies as having a disability. Our survey respondents, in this case, we had almost 12% of our survey responses come back from someone who identified as having a disability. And that's what we intend to track, to make sure we're getting a good cross-section of the region, regional perspectives. And it's interesting, we're getting more and more survey responses now that CDTA provides service out in Montgomery County and up in Warren, Washington, because They're one of our key partners in promoting surveys, and we're just getting more and more information from folks that commute into the region, which is also helpful to know because it gives us a sense of the commute patterns that go beyond our traditional four county boundary as we move forward in our planning process. So where we're at now, as I said, we're into
Excuse me, what were the LEP adults that last row?
living English proficiency. So people who speak a language other than English as their first language. We're having a hard time capturing that data because without asking a question, what, you know, and I think that's something we're going to be working on in future surveys. So for the next steps, as I said, we're entering the imagine phase now. This month, we're working on a needs assessment report. This gets at the nuts and bolts of infrastructure, right? I talked about the aging bridges and older roadways. You know, what are the actual physical needs for the region? We're also going to be getting into scenario planning in November. So we'll be having a number of scenarios. Starting with a status quo, keep doing, you know, we keep going the way we're going, what are the impacts of that? We're also thinking about a growth scenario. What if we grew the region to 1 million people? What would that look like by 2050? You know, and what would that mean for the transportation system? So these are kinds of some of the things we'll be talking about. We're also wrapping up the collection of a database of regional videos through drones, footage of the region and assets in the region and photos as related to those videos. As I said, phases 4 and 5 will probably be this winter, starting roughly January, February on through September of 2025. So I would be happy to come back next year when we have sort of the draft plan to share with everyone to review. And that's kind of where we're at and where we're going at this point. So wanting more information, there's my contact information. You can sign up for our e-newsletter if you're not already getting our e-newsletter. It's worth just plugging into that. If I have any questions.
I'm sure there's gonna be questions. Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, Cindy.
Lot to digest. Anybody wanna?
Are there any active
Sure.
surveys that we could share? with the
Right
board?
this second, no, we're actually in the midst of designing the new survey for phase 3. We're hoping to get input from folks on that draft vision statement and the planning scenarios all at once. So that'll be coming soon.
Would it be possible to send us the presentation that way, like to sign up for the e-news? I don't have to type in e.
Absolutely. Mark has a copy and
I do.
be happy to send it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
How often does the plan get updated?
So by law, we're required to update every 5 years. So we kind of start the process 2 years before the due date, if you will. So it's an ongoing process really. And there's other work that happens in those other years where whether it's data collection or other things that we start building data sets for, or gather information on, like condition of roadways, for example. You know, we'll drive around the region and get a visual survey of the condition of roads so that we can make those estimates in terms of need.
Can you talk a little bit about how the Vision Zero concept feeds into this plan?
Sure. So I mentioned traffic safety was an issue that certainly is on everyone's front of mind in our region when it comes to the transportation system. In parallel to this effort, we're doing a Capital Region Vision Zero Safety Action Plan. The Vision Zero concept, you know, is almost exactly as it sounds, right? How do we eliminate fatalities and serious injuries from our roadway network? And one tool that's being considered to do that is sort of this, traditionally we do a site-specific analysis, right? We say there's a bunch of crashes and we're going to analyze why they're happening and try to come up with some solutions to fix the problem. That works in some areas, but it doesn't work in many areas because some of these crashes happen for other reasons. So we have to look at a system level approach, and it's the systemic level approach to safety that's going to be the big change in how we think about traffic safety moving forward. So it's not just at this intersection, this happened, it's that this intersection has characteristics that are represented in a range of intersections in the region, and we can treat them all proactively before somebody gets hurt or killed. And along with that, all of the pieces of that puzzle beyond the engineering vehicle technology, enforcement community, how the judiciary works in our region and our state. And all of the different pieces and components to traffic safety are going to be part of the systemic approach to safety. So this regional Vision Zero plan is also sort of, I'll call it maybe 40% along the way. The recommendations from that are going to get fed into the long range plan. And we're working in close partnership with our funding partners, particularly City of Albany, Saratoga Springs, Troy, Waterloo, and Green Island. But the plan is going to be a regional plan. And, just sort of stay tuned on that one as well, because I think we're going to get a lot of input from the public on sort of the expectations of the countermeasures, if you will, that get identified in that plan.
One of the major countermeasures you may have noticed is our city is reducing their speeds to 25 miles an hour.
And we, these technology, the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit opportunity offers, I've been to some neighborhood associations lately, and there's concerns about some of this, as well as the school zone cameras that are being tested in Albany. And, one of the complaints was, well, I don't understand why law enforcement just isn't doing their job. And the way I try to say to folks is you've got to remember that law enforcement can't be everywhere at every moment of the day. And even in the city of Albany, there's a reduction in the number of officers on the street right now. We just don't have the humans to fill all the roles. So these technological solutions offer another tool in that toolbox to help complement the work that law enforcement is doing on the most egregious, whether it's speeding, other violations.
Red lights would be a good example.
Yeah, so we were talking earlier before the meeting started about technological interventions. I do see a future where technology is going to have a much more significant impact on how we're using the transportation system. We can geofence a scooter, we can geofence a e-bike, we can shut an e-bike off if we don't like how fast that e-bike is going, if they exit a certain area. There's a lot of technology that's coming, and I think when you're thinking out to 2050, you'll see a lot more interventions involving technology.
That's a great segue to the question I was gonna toss at you, which is very, generalistic and futuristic, but when you interact with the folks at the federal level and, the deep thinkers, what are we sort of accommodating in our 2050 plan for that next wave of technology? Is it, driverless vehicles? I mean, how are we planning for the unknown, I guess, is the broad question.
And I think that's the question, right? It's what are these disruptors, what we call them, right? These technologies that are not yet ready for prime time, but we know are in testing or looming out there, or some of which are available and just aren't implemented yet. There's no doubt there's increased emphasis on considering them in your long range plan. And I think that's a big topic we'll be exploring as part of this, and how far we can say certain things and how do we prepare communities for what's to come. When you're talking about automated vehicles, they need visual cues on the roadway system for how to navigate a street. If you don't have lane striping on your roadway, maybe that vehicle's not going to pick up information the same way that it would if it did not have those lanes. And then there's just sort of the overall internet network, right? So broadband, I know CDRPC is working on that broadband study. What does that mean for our rural areas? Not only our urban areas, but our rural areas as well. So there's a lot of questions, not a lot of answers. And if we had the crystal ball, we probably wouldn't be sitting in this room, right? Yeah. But I think those are the kinds of things that we're definitely going to be discussing more and more in the plan, and what communities should be thinking about as they move forward with their own planning. And it's good to see, communities like Albany at least trying some things out, because we're going to learn some things. CDTA, obviously, if you're not aware, they just piloted the scooter program, and they've been testing that in a couple of the cities in the region. So learning about how our user group could potentially use these devices, and there's a lot of private micro mobility devices. It's a term, if you don't already know, you should get familiar with. which refer to sort of those two-wheeled, one-wheeled vehicles. You've seen anything from a motorized unicycle to a skateboard. There's all kinds of devices out there, and they're being used for all sorts of reasons. Some people think, oh, it's just, somebody thinks they're cool, the cool factor. People are actually using these for transportation. They can't afford a car. The buses aren't going where they need to go. They may not have a driver's license. They may not have other tools at their disposal. So these devices become very affordable and reachable for folks to just live their lives. And we as planners need to think about that and how we're designing our communities and designing sites. And that comes back to land use and density and, providing alternative transportation options in the form of things like bike lanes and trails and, places for people to safely use these vehicles. Because there's a lot of questions and concerns as more and more of these vehicles are on the roadway network.
How much consideration is being given, should be given to allowing for the adaptation towards bus rapid transit? Of course, CDTA has gone with the express buses, which is great. At the same time, the express buses have to sit in traffic with everybody else. And I'm always thinking about the experience I had many, many years ago. First time I flew into Chicago and not knowing anybody, took a taxi from O'Hare into the city and sat, for an hour and a half on the JFK, quote unquote, expressway, while the train that goes from the airport to downtown is zipping past every 5 minutes. And you learn, I'm not gonna take, next I'm taking the train, right? So, and that's, people, I think if people can see the bus zipping by.
Yeah. I think the survey responses we've been getting have interestingly pointed specifically to the BRT system. People like the BRT system, but they want to see the next generation.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? How do we connect a train station in that airport? That seems to be the number one route that continues to come up in conversation publicly. And I think these are the things we're going to have to start talking about is what does that next generation of transit look like in our region? Are we at a place where we can say, we're gonna reallocate street space for a different type of transportation? And that's a question. It is a big question mark. We did a bus lane feasibility study. We identified 5 or 6 locations in the region that were the most feasible for bus lanes even today. And I'll be honest, some of the reaction from leadership was mixed. And there were a lot of concerns about worrying about, I'm going to take away space from the bicyclists who've been in my office now for the last 5 years demanding bike lanes in exchange now for a bus lane. And how do I balance my limited street space, right? And there's ways we can design for all of these users. And I think there's just more work and education that needs to be done, and kind of alleviating some of those fears. And it's going to take one community in our region to kind of be the first one to dip their toe in. And once we get one on the ground in our region, not pointing to other communities in the country, once we get the first one, then the door will open up. And I think it's possible. I'm optimistic that's
Well, when more people have that experience of going from the airport to downtown Chicago.
Right. Yep.
Anybody else with any?
Yeah, I was just wondering too, I mean, we see on the news that we have drivers from outside of our country that don't know our rules. And are you looking at how we adapt signage and the kind of thing, how we get a safety factor into that?
Yeah, I think in the Vision Zero work, we're gonna touch upon that a little bit. Great example is the infamous bridge in Clifton Park that gets hit. Despite the investment DOT just made on new signage and all these things. And what happens is those phones, they're supposed to use a commercial GPS system. They're using their iPhone and that iPhone is not picking up that bridge is too low. And it's just the eyes are glued to the phone. And how do we change that behavior? Again, this is where technology comes in. And I think there's a lot of things we can do with technology if the political will is there. The big question mark with a lot of the technology is the political will there, right? And
well, there's privacy issues people get into too. There's so much there.
There's so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
It's a very tricky, and it is a national level conversation. I think the language part is a little interesting and nuanced because of the number of languages spoken in our region. I just recently heard that Albany High School has over 80 languages spoken in that high school. Our three most prevalent languages in this region, aside from Spanish, are Chinese, and Arabic. And not far behind is French Creole. So it's a very diverse group of languages. And how do we prepare materials and information in all of these languages, recognizing that? And it's
I
a tricky
think
one.
it's a habit issue too. People from outside of here, I mean, if you've driven in, say, the Bahamas and they have friendly honking and we have unfriendly honking.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, there's.
In a warm.
There's cultural differences. Even
Yeah.
state to state, there's differences in how drivers
True.
behave on the roadway network. And I think there's a lot, again, that comes back to that systemic approach. You know, I have my personal opinions about, you know, how we issue driver's licenses in New York State and the role of defensive driving in New York State. And I think we could be doing a lot more on education and you know, even those of us who've driven a long time, we forget, you know, the number one question when roundabouts became a thing is, well, how do I drive it? Well, you know, there wasn't materials at that time. We put them out there as engineers and planners, but we didn't, you know, provide the educational piece, right? But aside from reading it somewhere or getting a flyer, where are you getting this information? You know, maybe that's a strategy that there should be more reinforcement of education on from a user perspective, you know, and these are things that we'll certainly be talking about in that safety plan.
One of the most
Education, yeah.
shocking things I saw in the Vision Zero process was the data on the percentage of crashes generated by youth drivers. And we have also the fact that defensive driving is not a course in high school
It's
anymore.
not a thing,
No, it's
you know,
not.
those of us, you know, I think of a certain age, we all had to take defensive driving. I know I had to take it was like a 6-week course. You had a roadway section, you were out there, and it just, that does not happen now. And that's concerning. And you wonder why, you know, there's many reasons why young people are not getting licenses and are excited about getting them. You wonder if that's part of it, you know, they don't have the education to feel comfortable driving a car, even if they have access to a vehicle and can afford the insurance and all the things. So lots of challenges, but I also feel like there's lots of opportunity. You know, we're very fortunate in this region to not, you know, we talk about congestion. In context with other regions of our size, you know, it's not that bad. You know, there are spots, there are pinch points, there's things that are inconsistent like the Northway, but overall, we're a pretty easy region to get around. But if you have a car, and I think that's the message we're hearing from folks is, hey, we want more options and we're starting to demand those options. And that's going to be the key of balancing our resources moving forward.
The other
Options to be effective because it is so easy to get around if you have a car that's, you know.
Right.
Easier, yes.
And the other thing that I see is people get used to their path they take. And if there's any change in that, traffic wise, walking, they just explode. They like it. As always.
Sandy, thank you. This is really, we
Yeah,
could
it's a
spend,
great question.
well, we could spend all day doing this.
Appreciate it.
So, and the in motion task force meetings, those are open to anybody here to sit in on.
Yeah, and as I said, you know, probably the best way to connect is through the e-newsletter, and check out our emotionplan.org website.
Okay, great work.
Thanks, Sandy.
Thank you.
It's a huge task that you've taken on and I've actually seen it progress from the early stages to now, and it's phase one is done and it's starting to show now, so. Good job.
All right. We're gonna keep pushing forward here. Next item on our agenda, we have a presentation on the Regional Comprehensive Climate Action Plan from Todd.
Sit up here. So I can address you. Mark, we have our sustainability page on
Sure.
the website. You guys ready for another presentation?
Well, we had a break with questions.
You wouldn't be insulted if I got a cup of coffee while you, before you started.
It's actually good, huh? Formal line,
Yeah.
so if I
I
am,
think I need to-
right behind you.
We'll take-
So I'm not gonna read your slides, so you can, I'll talk to you directly. Maybe it's my old fashioned bent, but more, so this is just an overview of high level of Mark asked me to make on our process and where we are today with the CPRG program. So I just wanna, contextualize things for maybe some of the new members and also just so you understand as an organization, you know, why are we even doing this and how this ties into the things that we've been doing at CDRPC for a while now, because our organization got involved with what we broadly call sustainability, but it's more climate and energy related stuff going back to 2012 when we took on a grant from NYSERDA that was in partnership with DEC to help communities that had taken the Climate Smart Community Pledge. And we did a pilot program with 3 regions altogether in New York State. And we did that for 3 years to try to help communities to understand what things they can do and to provide the resources and education for them. That led to NYSERDA's Clean Energy Communities Program, which we're now into our 8th year on that program. They've provided us significant funding. We've had $10 million of funding from NYSERDA. And we have been positioning ourselves as an organization that can now handle much bigger areas for deploying these kind of services to local governments. So we have been working in what I originally proposed, quite frankly, the Eastern Territory idea of a consortium of regional agencies. And so 4 regional agencies with us as the prime contractor, and then 3 others that cover the Hudson, the Mohawk, and the North Country have been providing services now to 28 counties, helping them through the high impact actions is what NYSERDA calls them for clean energy and efficiency and the kind of things they can do with as local governments. And that also then led to DEC putting out, following this territory model, the Eastern Territory model, a 2-year, what they originally called pilot program, which we just finished this past year on supporting communities with the Climate Smart Community certification and broadly with other kind of climate action. So these kinds of things we've been doing now for a while, and actually we have another $2.2 million pending grant for another 3 years of service with working with DEC and hoping that we get that award. We have to see. Mark, it was interesting. You sent me yesterday. I've never seen this before, but they sent us a list of who we're competing against in the Eastern Territory. And so there's some major, actually international firms that are trying to get take this away from us, but we'll see. We've had a lot of success, and the focus really, and this has been, I think, one of the ways of defining what regional planning can be, is to be an interface between the state and now the federal with this new CPRG grant and local governments. And how regional plan really can be that interface for taking state goals and state programs and helping municipalities to do them. And that's where this idea of a territory where they can do essentially 3 contracts for the whole state to cover all local government services. So I give you that by way of background because when the EPA announced the CPRG, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program last year, this was a perfect complement to the things we have been doing all along. And what it allows us to do is to essentially create a container for all of the good things that are happening here. And that's been the philosophy I've used in going forward with this is not so much a plan in which we are telling people what to do. It actually isn't at all. And I've been emphasizing that all along and how we're doing this. But what we're saying is, here is a means of taking what everyone else is doing in this region and kind of putting it in one place, having conversations about it and developing a set of best practices that are voluntary, but we can help you with them just like with the services provided through these other programs. And so the gist of this CPRG program is focused on one half of, and Sandy mentioned this, there's really 2 pieces to the idea around doing things related to climate change. One of them is called mitigation, and that is you're looking for ways to reduce your greenhouse gases, and they emerge from using primarily, fossil fuels and how we do things with our energy system and finding ways to reduce those. And then the other piece is mitigation and I'm sorry, adaptation. And with adaptation, we're saying, regardless of even what's causing this, we are looking for ways to respond to extreme weather events. This particular plan is not focused on adaptation. Our Climate Smart Community Program, in which we just finished 2 years, had a piece of that. We did 16 resilience plans under that. We helped 16 communities do resilience plans under that. And now in our new proposal, we have a set of new plans we'll be doing if we get this money to help those communities adapt to primarily water and heat. And so there's a number of issues and they're related to hazard mitigation plans. And hopefully we get that grant and can go forward with that. Back to the CPRG though, this is mitigation. It's looking at carbon reduction. So we had to follow, as always with these programs, the dictates of the program, which were interesting because instead of saying, well, you have this 4 years, because it's a 4-year $1 million grant that we have to do this plan, they said to us, EPA, well, you have about 7 months to do a priority plan. And then you'll have another 1.5 years or so to do the comprehensive climate action plan. So that really put pressure on us to operate fast, to identify, well, what are our priorities? Well, under one of our previous grant programs that I mentioned, we did a greenhouse gas inventory for the capital region. And so we have a 2010 baseline for the carbon footprint of each of the communities. They allowed us to use that under what we call the PCAP, that Priority Climate Action Plan, which was due in March. So that is available on our website. And Mark, okay, so you have that. Will you click on the document and open up that PDF, and then we can maybe just scroll down to like one of the pages of the measures, because what we're doing then is
there it is.
we're identifying a series of measures. And so just scroll down, keep scrolling down and up, and we can stop at maybe the first one, which was one of the biggest emission sectors is transportation. So we can
Keep going.
well, first, why don't we start right there and then just say this. So this is how we do the climate action plan, is we look at the different economic sectors, and this ties to our inventory. So we look at transportation, we look at buildings, we look at energy sources, we look at waste, and there's also industry, chemicals, and some others. And so we have to work on each of those sections and develop measures to reduce the carbon footprint in each of those. So when we scroll down then to the first one, which should be transportation. All right, so how are we what's our approach to this? Well, we have a transportation council, we have CDTA. This is what they do. So we weren't going to approach this from, hey, let's come up with measures. Our approach, just like we're doing with the whole plan, essentially is let's reach out to them. Let's let them essentially help populate their measures from the things that they're doing. And so we worked back and forth with the Transportation Council and CDTA to develop these measures. And then as the process carries out this year with Sandy and your plan, we'll swing back around later in the year to see where we need to edit anything, what new things need to be swapped out in transportation. And then we did the same, and we don't have to go to all of the next ones, but just you get the gist of the kinds of, you can shift to zero emission vehicles. You can see encourage smart roads, support ride sharing, carpooling. These are all the kinds of things essentially that would be in Transportation Council's plan, but are specific to carbon reduction. So there's other things that they're looking at that wouldn't come into a plan like this. And then we worked with the Affordable Housing Partnership of Albany, who has a consortium of organizations that are working on a grant from NYSERDA called the Clean Energy Hub. And they're focused on disadvantaged communities, and they're focused particularly on buildings and on conversion to heat pumps, building electrification. And so we developed with that group, and it's actually a series of different, like the Troy Architectural Program and Cornell Cooperative Extension. There's a number of people or groups that are participating in that. We developed the measures for buildings. Then we had interest from different groups that are looking at waste, the waste reduction and the circular economy and ways of recycling and those kinds of things. So we worked with a consortium of groups working on that to develop measures for waste as well. And those became then the priority sectors for our PCAP. And the waste wasn't going to be a priority sector, but people had come to us and said, wait, and what was our priority? Our priority was because of the carbon footprint of buildings and transportation cover more than 50% of our carbon footprint for the region. And so that's where we needed to focus our attention. Then as the PCAP was submitted in March, and you can all pull it from our website if you haven't seen it, and you can check out what it is up to that point. We then have moved into agriculture, because I forgot, I think, to mention that earlier. And so we met with a group of agricultural support groups and some farmers and got input on ag reduction measures. And we've since completed that. And we're working with industry now, which is different. So industry is a little bit of a different thing because first of all, there are industries that are regulated separately. And so we know what, because they're in our previous inventory. They have certain federal and state requirements, and all the big emitters, we know who they are and we know what their carbon footprint is. And so we reached out to some of them. We just had a conversation with Wholesome, which used to be Lafarge. They're a cement manufacturer, and they're the biggest, they're the only one in the state. And they're our largest emitter by far, more than any municipality, just one industry. And just to hear from them about, well, what are the kinds of things you're doing in terms of reducing your footprint? They had some interesting ideas about some of their inputs into the cement process and just more of a conversation of learning and listening to what they're doing. We can't talk to every industry. We've been reaching out. I just got a contact from Finch Paper and Glens Falls, because our plan, by the way, covers 8 counties. It's the REDC region of the capital region. It's not just the 4 of the Transportation Council or our core here. And so we're going through that process now. And we also are updating our greenhouse gas inventory. So we have been coordinating. There's a grant for this program given out in Rochester region and the Buffalo region and the New York City region. So we've been having regular coordination meetings with them this whole past year to agree to the data sources that we'd be using and the data protocols for an updated greenhouse gas inventory. And that's just the kind of baseline that we all would work from and look at. So
Is that so you're gonna have an apple to apples?
That's the goal. And so what we did, and maybe Mark, you can go back up to where we are. And before I maybe you even just look at this, one of the things we did too is we also scroll down just up a little more right there. We also reached out to a series of communities that are essentially have been climate leaders, that have done climate action planning, have taken a lot of steps to create a municipal advisory group that we've been meeting regularly with to guide us as well. And so that, and we have another meeting with that group coming up next month. So they've been kind of the check on what we've been doing with the regional groups. But our next step is to, first of all, take this out to the communities themselves, because we've worked with over 50 communities in the capital region through the Clean Energy Community and Climate Smart Community Program with our outreach coordinator team, with Josh, with Haley, with Tara, and so our next phase of outreach is going to be direct one-on-one. We're going to each of these communities with our draft measures, with the updated inventory, and having one-on-one conversations with each of these communities. And so that starts in January. We're figuring about a 4 to 5 month outreach process for that. And then we'd be in a position to be putting together an actual document that we can then air out more publicly. So, going back to the greenhouse gas inventory, we have developed a dashboard. I don't know if you can find the link to that, Mark. It should be on this page, in which we have taken our previous inventory and made it visually accessible to communities. And then we'll be able to input the new the new data that we're developing for the inventory into this dashboard. And so any community, so this is an example of it, and Maddie did a great job working with us on this, and to be able to pick any community, to be able to look at your energy outputs, to look at your carbon footprint, and then we'll be able to set this up in a way in which we can then compare it to the new inventory. But also we have all these other technical requirements as well, why we have a consultant to Climate Action Associates that have to do with, we need to set targets, we need to set projections, we need to look at the measures and how they're actually going to affect the reduction of carbon. But again, our approach has been, this is voluntary and this is what's realistic in the capital region. So I've basically directed our consultant, and I have to, we have to, with state grants, we're doing, what the state wants. In this case, we feel like we should be doing what is practical for this region. And that's how we're approaching it. So we're not saying, well, the CLCPA, which is the state's goals, this is what you all have to meet. We're not telling anybody, first of all, this is, you have to do anything. This is voluntary, and this is saying what's realistic in this region, and let's try to establish goals that are somewhat realistic and affordable, and that we don't disadvantage ourselves as a state or as a region by doing things that are pushing things that aren't ready. You know, because the technology will catch up. A lot of this stuff is technological, not all of it. That big nut about land use, which we've been talking about for the 31 years I've been doing this, and with Andy a lot of that time. And it's like, well, that's still a tricky one, because that's a whole social transformation. It's not just technology. There's technology as a part of it. But really, when we're talking about, say, heat pump technology, electric vehicle technology, these are technologies. And as they get better, people will just go to them. Nobody had to force anyone to go get a smartphone. You went for it because it worked and it was cool, right? So I did this summer. I bought an electric lawnmower, and I didn't do it because I was trying to do anything per se for the environment. I just wanted an electric lawnmower. Let's try this out with a battery. The thing is great. I would never go back to a gas lawnmower. It has nothing. So it's like when that starts to happen, when electric vehicles are affordable and there's charging infrastructure in place, and obviously we try to set the table for that through the different policies and try to jumpstart these things. And the federal government tries to do it, in the state with incentives for new technology. These things will roll out because people will make the choices. It won't be because they're forced to do it. And that's kind of the philosophy. And it's just listening to others and communities and regional organizations about what they're doing. I remember, it was over a decade ago, and the state did fund sustainability plans. And back then, before we really convinced the state that we were the go-to, a regional commission couldn't do a regional sustainability plan by the definition. We were shut out of it at that time. So consultants came in and did it for us. And I was sitting in on one of the work group meetings, and it was for agriculture. And I was listening to a young consultant from out of the region talk about Granny Smith apples and how these are changing. And we need to really tell the farmers how we're going to have to switch from this apple to this. And I was like, wait. And of course I had to say something and say, no, we need to go out and listen to the farmers. They're the ones out there, and they're the ones who already know, and let's learn from them. And so that's kind of been the philosophy I've been using all along with how we're doing this plan. So I'll stop there. I know you've had a lot of talking to today.
That's why it's so
Any
successful,
questions?
though.
That's good.
You listen to people, right?
Yeah, good.
Good.
Anybody want to jump in, comments, questions? I have a quick question, administratively. At what point in time during the process would you next need to be put on our agenda here to report back on the next step? There's a reason why I'm asking.
Yeah, so one of the things that is going to be done this Friday, which is much get into in-depth on the measures we've been developing and to showcase the new inventory, but it's only at the county level as of now. We're going to bring it down to the municipal level, but our consultant's putting that all together to do a presentation at our workshop at Hudson Valley Community College Friday. So we're going to be doing the plenary session is on this topic, and we will be going over those details. But I think, getting out into the communities and having that conversation and then packaging it in a way that can be commented on and accessible. Right now, it's in a very, the measures are in a very complicated spreadsheet because of the way that we have to tie everything to these projections and these goals and a lot of the stuff that we're being required to do. Because with the other things that I didn't mention, we have to look at, the authority to implement. We're not an implementing agency, so we have to figure out who can do these things. We have to create a workforce development analysis of what are those issues, which is the other piece of the industry sector. Is not only that they're regulated, but that there are so-called green industries in our region, and how do we promote them? So we've coordinated with CEG and are looking for them to provide input for us on workforce issues and on a kind of plan for promoting green industries. But going back to your question.
Sean, really want to figure out, so right now you're at the PCAP stage, right?
Well, we finished the PCAP and we're in the trying to finish out the measures for the rest of the CCAP. But there's all these other little pieces that are requirements, the workforce thing so
what's the timetable?
This is due in about a year from now. It's due in September. So I would think that a draft that you could kind of grasp the whole vision of it would probably be in June.
Okay.
something like that.
That's what
I
I'm
think would be, we could certainly continue to give you, I can give you updates as we're going along and
No, of
whatever you
course.
need. But in terms of something that we're starting to put in a tangible form that you can read, and then of course, any of the communities that we reach out to, if they're your communities and you want to be part of that conversation,
Well,
then,
and that's the drift that I was alluding to with Gary
mm,
earlier, which I'll come back to,
Mhm.
but I was
Yeah.
planting that seed. Thank you.
Hey, Todd,
yeah, you know,
as you work for the greater plan, there's a lot of great data. I mean, are there ways to kind of plant the seed with some of these communities and or private partners of, just bullet points of like, these are the revenue neutral ideas that kind of like a measurement of what are the really easy fixes people can do from what we're learning? I just, sometimes just having that bullet points of, if you turn your, if you use this grant source to turn your vehicle fleet over to this energy, after 4 years, you could see it.
So, and that's why I gave you the introduction of the other programs we've been working on, because that's exactly what we do. So it's like, yeah, Haley, Josh, she said, yeah, this is what I do. We've been working with communities on the high impact actions that NYSERDA developed, which are very much the same kind of actions we're talking about here. And so we know what the low hanging fruit is, because those are the things that communities have grasped onto first to be able to accomplish. And then we know the things that are a little more complicated. But what the beauty of NYSERDA program has been, there's grant funding for doing these things. So we've had a lot of uptake and brought millions of dollars to the communities directly, not just to our organization, from them taking these kinds of steps. So we have a group of high impact action. How many actions altogether now with all of they've expanded them dramatically. We used to have a group of 10 and now there's all these levels.
Yeah,
so it's something like 30 something actions that are gradations of things like, say, a campaign that a community can run to promote heat pumps in their community. And if they get a certain number of installs, they get a grant for it. Or if they can promote electric vehicles. So there's that built-in tie-in with those state programs that allows that complement.
The more that you're able to broadcast that, I think it's good. It is such a complex area of study, and the more we can do to get people engaged in small wins, and I think hope they stay actively engaged to bigger picture.
Yeah, and so, that's exactly what we've been building off of, is those previous, I said 8 years we've been doing energy communities. So that's a long time of communities being used to and knowing who the players are and the communities that are really interested in this, and they've established volunteer committees that we work with and that kind of thing. So there's a pretty good infrastructure that we've been developing here in the capital region.
Anybody else have any?
One very quick thing, picking up on your electric lawnmower and bragging on Schenectady County a little bit. We just purchased and put into service an electric Zamboni for our ice rink.
Cool.
It works.
Cool.
Now we gotta get a sign for it that says this is an electric Zamboni, but we're getting there.
So
It's pretty cool technology.
Is
You're
that,
right.
is any of
People
that
will
from
adopt this
NYSERDA?
stuff.
Because I can't.
No, that wasn't from NYSERDA, that was,
No.
but the county manager definitely wants like a nice little thing with the county logo on the Zamboni.
That's just the chair of the
Well, that said,
legislature.
if you brought it up, I
But no, it's just when that technology is available, people will adopt it.
Yeah.
Right.
It does a great job. People love the ice.
But what would be nice, I was thinking, because we were thinking, this is way down the line when we have like a document and trying to make it visually accessible with
There you go.
like little pullouts of pictures and snippets of the kind of things people are doing, so maybe we can get a shot.
That's
at
great.
that.
If people see that, oh, I can do that.
We got pictures.
Right, rather than.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah. Well, let me tie this all together with kind of what we've been working on. This is sort of like 4A on the agenda, which is not on the agenda.
It's okay.
So last time we met, I believe it was last time, Madison presented on the housing study. And there was a great deal of engagement from the board on that, looking at, affordability issues and how that impacts, the regional growth and so forth. And so one of the outcomes from our discussions at that prior meeting was to bring that study more directly to our legislative bodies and perhaps, go from there to establishing some roundtable discussions with all the stakeholders. And so, a couple of weeks ago, Mark and I met with the legislative leadership in Albany County and discovered that, in fact, Albany County legislators have identified housing as their number one top priority at the moment to address. And so they have a sort of informal working group of county legislators that we're gonna come in.
Madison doesn't know this yet.
Madison, Madison, you will be going to and
Give me like a week notice.
yeah, and making a presentation but keeping that dialogue on, but it's also part of what I've been trying to accomplish during my 1-year tenure here as the chair, which is to create more relationship and linkage between legislators, not just the legislature, but individual legislators as to what the Regional Planning Commission does and what resources we have. And, having worked in the state legislature in my formative years, politics are retail. And it's very meaningful and this tie into the climate program, very meaningful for an elected state, local, to hook up a constituent with, for instance, a NYSERDA grant for a heat pump. And then going, aggregating that. And so we wanted, sort of like take all these programmatic areas that we're engaged in and bring it down to, bring it to the individual, legislative level. And that's an initiative that I'm trying to, with the board's blessing, of course, trying to engage in more directly. So Mark's had a presentation to the Saratoga County Board of Supervisors with Joe, I should say. And Gary, if we could set that up, however you think is most meaningful, impactful, but most useful to the members of your legislative body. And, to folks in Rensselaer County, I don't know who's got the best, who here has that, Wayne probably has the outreach to reach out and just create an opportunity, whether it be housing, whatever the issues are, to just make a presentation as to what the Regional Planning Commission is all about, what we're doing. And, it's all about, there's a term, lowering the level of abstraction, which is, we're in this ivory tower here, but, we drill down, what does it really mean to the individual person who's mowing their lawn? And that's really, where the action is ultimately, or the transportation level, what does it really mean to the person who needs to get from where they're living to where their job could be, but they have that impediment on the transportation side. So these are the types of things that I'm trying to focus on. So that would be very helpful if you could.
You actually brought up an excellent issue where I am trying to put out our data sources to individuals, and the response that I'm getting from it is absolutely incredible. I mean, corporations and everything, they come back and say, this is exactly what I needed. And it's just talking about the messages and getting them out there to let people take advantage of all of it. All of it. Tools.
Make a joyful notice.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, just to comment on that, that's one of the beauties of and why the Clean Energy Community Program has been so valuable to us, to the state, the communities, is they've kind of embedded that in the program. That's just the nature of the program, is you have to, how many presentations we've made to town boards and city boards, and just the there's grant funding attached, and this isn't just going to the sustainability committee, it has to be approved by the legislature, and they're aware we're bringing in money, so it's kind of at least in that program, it's embedded in the program. I think with housing, that's different, because we don't have that same, and even with like smart growth stuff, we've never really had the, okay, if you do this, we'll give you a grant, and that's been actually one of the most gratifying things for me personally in this last decade or so, is being able to do things for communities and actually reward them, and it's allowed us to bring into the fold all kinds of different communities, because we message it apolitically. So it's not just like, I know in the world out there and on the internet, everything is, divisive, and it's put in political terms. Locally, we work with all kinds of communities and all on the political spectrum, and because they see the advantages to some of the stuff. And so that's, at least in Clean Energy Communities, it's embedded in the program. So I tip my hat to NYSERDA for having come up with something like that.
It's great. Bob, thank you.
All right. Well,
Thanks, Todd.
thank you. Couple of options.
Okay, thanks, Greg.
I'm sure you influenced the race campaign.
Yeah, but that's treacherous. All right. Now we go into the areas where I'm always weakest. I went to law school, so there wouldn't be any math. So, financial statements, I defer.
Sure. We are at 75% through the year. We're in a good financial position. We are in a good cash flow position. I don't have any concerns there. If we don't get reimbursed from some of our state grants in the next coming months, I may be getting concerned about cash flow. We have about 120,000 or so out there right now that we're waiting on reimbursement. But we have nice amount of money in the bank. Our class balance, this is our investment account, is 157,000. So we're on track to make about $9,000 in interest in this year after making that investment. So thanks again, Joe, for that recommendation. And we have about $400,000 in outstanding receivables due to the commission.
Comments?
Oh, looks good.
This requires a motion.
It does require a motion. Yeah, I see the asterisk there. All in favor of accepting the financial statement?
Yeah.
Objections? Motion carries. Next item, number 6, is the appointment of a nominating committee for the officers for the 2025 calendar year.
It's our annual process of having creating a moving up ceremony for the officers. We usually have a representative from each county.
Don't look at me, I gave it.
You did.
Yeah.
You're good, Gary.
I'll help out in Saratoga.
Thank you, Craig.
Greg, anyone other volunteers from the other 3 counties to serve on the nominating committee?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Bill,
Being on.
Charles? That leaves
Rensselaer County.
Wayne, nominating committee?
It's usually conducted over email.
Judy would have a little bit more free time than I would.
I'm happy to, but I would defer to you if you want to do it and doesn't sound it.
If you could, I have too many irons in the fire right
Okay.
now. So.
Okay, so there's our nomination committee.
All right.
Who's Albany? You?
Albany is Bill.
Bill Bruce, Albany, Charles Davidson, Schenectady, Judith Bressler, Rensselaer, Greg Warner, Saratoga.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I didn't ask for a motion, but that's okay.
Is there a motion needed?
Well, technically the chair appoints the members,
Okay.
but it doesn't matter. So I will circulate to that group. Well, one, I'll connect you all together and I'll circulate the contact information for your fellow board members.
We have a budget modification memo, I understand.
Right, in consultation with our Secretary Treasurer, David Hogenkamp, he has noted that our consultant services line is projected to be much higher than we originally budgeted. So we felt it would be a good idea to true that up, just to authorize the expenses on that line. It's primarily being driven by the consultant working on the regional broadband plan and assisting the counties with grant applications for the New York BEAD program. Anytime I open a budget, you might as well true things up. So there are a variety of changes in there that are making things as accurate as I feel possible on the revenue and expense side. So they're detailed in the companion memo, but again, the main Main one is adding 50,000 to the anticipated expenses, revenue and expenses for the broadband grant.
Yeah, all good news, receiving more money for broadband. I make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is a staff report.
Yes, verbal staff report today.
Okay,
I would like to introduce Lauren Ortel. She introduced herself before. She's our new environmental planner. She's degree in environmental design from Boulder.
Yeah, my bachelor's is in environmental design, specializing in planning and urban design, and then my master's is from Cornell University in regional planning.
Right, she started here 3-4 weeks ago, just getting her feet wet, but she's gonna be the lead on our technical assistance programs, our water quality programs. And she's doing a lot of variety of other work. So I look forward to working with you, Lauren, and so lucky to have you as part of our team. Our team has been doing a great job. I'll just give a high level summary of the things that you've been working on. We have been working on the regional broadband plan. We have a draft plan that has been developed. Our consultant is working to create some realistic cost estimates for build out scenarios. They've also been working with Albany County to file a grant application for the county partnership program for construction of fiber internet, county-owned fiber internet in the western part of the hill towns in the county. We've also been working with the other counties to help identify quote unquote grant areas that would be the subject of applications that would be filed in partnership with internet service providers. That has been finalized, and thank you, Charles, for being the lead for your county. And those boundaries have been submitted to the state. In water quality, we're still completing and getting up and running the Water Volite Reservoir Protection Plan and restarting the Tomahawk Protection Plan. In economic development, we completed a draft economic impact analysis for the University of Albany. And again, there are over $1 billion of economic impact annually. Thanks, Kate, for working on that. And thank you to Lauren for helping with the document design, which increased the professionalism. We've been working with a number of communities to help them administer Northern Border Regional Commission grants for a variety of issues. Our technical assistance program has moved to a rolling application. And again, Lauren is the lead. We've started a new project in partnership with the town of Bethlehem and other stakeholders to take a look at a regional reuse center, so circular economy type stuff. On Friday, we have our annual planning and zoning workshop at Hudson Valley Community College. We have more than 150 folks registered, so it looks like an exciting program. If you want to learn about micromobility, Sandy's giving a presentation on that. And as Todd mentioned, we're going to have an open plenary session talking about the climate action plan. We have updated the lease for this building. So we signed another 5-year lease. They're starting construction on the new office today. So we're looking forward to having that completed. And we have this new beautiful conference room furniture that is part of the detention facility project. A project which is 79% complete. So once it's fully complete and we have a parking lot there, we'll have our meeting at the detention facility.
November 15th. And in fact, the Albany County Legislative Leadership wanted a tour, right, as well. That's how it ties together there. So, okay. Thank you, Mark. Next item is other business. I don't know what fall into that category.
Let's go Mets.
Yeah. let's-
Yankee.
Wish I'd worn my fleece.
Well,
Almost did,
before
but I'm
things,
superstitious.
before
If I
things
wear
get
that,
ugly,
they lose.
let's hope for a Subway series.
Yes.
right, where
Yeah.
all this
Down to
together.
that.
I'll be fine with that.
Down to
Our next meeting is December 18th. Is it be here or at the,
It depends if there's a parking lot.
okay,
that.
so location TBD. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Multiple parties have made such motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody. So I appreciate the excellent turnout.
Gary, send me an email, the one fifty.
My pleasure.
Park your car.
I'll look at it. There are no cost estimates. That's great. Lauren is believed. That's, I think. Yeah, so I saw. And he,